Hi everybody, it's M. Welcome to the Eternal Spoiler Breakdown. I am back from vacation. We are streaming at regular hours again, so we'll be on at 7 p.m. PST as per usual. And we're here today to talk about a new story campaign coming to Eternal. That's a playable campaign with a bunch of new cards similar to previous mini sets. This is Eternal, the Hour of Glass. I'm super excited for this one. I've been really hoping to see more lore related to Bastion and like the kind of cool universe that Direwolf has designed and built cards around for the last year or so. This is a really cool universe. I'm very excited to see some stories told in it, and I'm hoping to see how this one sort of comes to its conclusion, midpoint, general crisis. It's going to be fun, to be sure. So yeah, we're going to get into it, and we're going to be talking about what's going on in Bastion and doing some exciting things. Also, there's going to be Talir, because why not? So there's a bunch of different cards to talk about. We're going to talk about all the spoiler stuff, but the pre-orders for this begin July 14th, so if you're interested in it, there will be a bunch of fancy stuff, which we'll cover. I think we're just going to go down the article this time and talk about all the things, because I always miss details along those lines. But yeah, first things first, let's break down the cards, starting with Final Confrontation. Each player chooses one of their units, kill the rest. This is a 5-cost in double green, double primal, so very similar to Harsh Rule in cost, but does not kill all units, which is actually pretty relevant because one of the things that's really important about Harsh Rule is its ability to manifest in decks that are pretty heavily control and sort of control the board in a way that is actually really good for them. With Final Confrontation, if you are playing like an all-spell control deck, this is just not as good an alternative because the unit that you leave up will very frequently be the one that kills you. So you actually need to have some sort of unit focus, I think, to make this card worth it. And it has to be, something where you get sticky units that can actually stick around and your opponent, and you still have like decent removal or some way to like trade with your opponent's stuff. This is in Huru though, so at the very least you can save your Genitor Dovid if you're playing soldiers or any number of other like fairly tricky options, and you can keep a hold of some pretty interesting stuff as a result of it. Final Confrontation is a really cool card on a flavorful aspect. This is a card that just has that nice Eternal mechanical feel where the wording of it is just intensely satisfying. It's just one of those things where you get to look at it and you get to go, yes, this card does exactly what it says on the tin, and the thing it says on the tin is pretty sweet and leads to an actual final confrontation between two units. I think it's flavorful as heck. It's a sweet mechanical choice. It's definitely not as powerful as like a Harsh Rule or other options, but being able to make your big battle bear or Genitor Dovid or any like huge enormous monster that you have stay on the board and fight only one other thing is kind of a cool effect and can lead to a significant amount of value for you under the right circumstances. I would say this card is a very circumstantial Harsh Rule, to be sure. It's not comparable to like Leave a Witness, where you get to keep stuff but your opponent doesn't, which is just a much more powerful version of this card. I think that this is something where your opponent's frequently going to have a unit left over that they're actually really happy with. There is typically one unit on the board that is just like a little bit more interesting to your opponent or more useful to your opponent that they're going to want to keep, that could be the key to victory for them. So that's always something that you have to pay attention with this card. But yeah, it's definitely a cool design, and I think it is a pretty powerful card if you're playing the right types of decks, which is a fairly limited subset since we are very deep in Huru to get this type of effect. Okay, we can talk a little bit about the Legendary Bundle. It's $40 and it's a 16-game PvE campaign, apparently following mostly Talir. We have 21 new cards. You get the premium versions, of course, if you pre-order the whole thing. And you also get a Ravenous Mandrake Totem, which that's going to be super exciting. Always fun to play with new totems, and like the card back and this type of thing. But mostly we're here to talk about the cards, so as exciting as all of this is, let's get into the other stuff. We got Lucent Guide, a 5/5 for 5 with Stealth, Ultimate Pay 7 and reveal Lucent Guide to play an Illumination Wisp, which is that 1/3 flying wisp with Endurance, if you've forgotten, and then gain 1 health for each of your units. When you entomb this card, you play 2 Illumination Wisps. So on pure rate, this card is really strong. It plays 2 flyers, which those flyers typically don't have a clock on their own, but 2 of them does give you both a decent clock and also a decent set of blockers for small units. Like if you have 2 1/3 endurance flyers on the board, then you are just safe from all types of aggro flyers, aggro red 1-drops, and aggro time 1-drops. Like you're just not going to get wrecked by soldiers if you have those types of cards. So Lucent Guide is just a really good stabilization tool on account of that Entomb. The ultimate ultimate ability is also pretty sick. Like, paying 7 is definitely not amazing, since you are only getting like a little bit of extra health out of it, and the Illumination Wisp is just like an extra little buddy. But overall, it's not really a bad thing to do if you're on a turn where you've played Lucent Guide down and you don't have anything else to do on the previous turn. You do have to reveal Lucent Guide to do it, which means that after the Lucent Guide has been revealed, which is very likely to be after this card happens, you're probably not going to get this effect. So this is just like a small added bonus. It's like a little add that can actually make sure that you get Illumination Wisps, even if the card gets silenced. But this is a 5/5 on rate with just like straight up good stuff going on. I think it's a pretty good, pretty efficient time card, and it should be pretty relevant in the stealth meta. There are a lot of cool stealth cards coming out in this particular format, and this is definitely one of the stronger ones, just due to its fairly high rate. Waystone Alignment, 1 cost. At the start of your turn, sacrifice Waystone Alignment to kill each unit, relic, and site with cost equal to 1, and you can amplify this to increase that cost by 1. So this is kind of an interesting one because it's got that sort of like Clock of Doom type thing going on where you can pay a decent amount to kill things that are of a specific type. These cards typically tend to be pretty powerful. This is I would say a pretty watered down version of like what the Magic equivalent might be. There are certainly versions of this card that have existed as like super powered cards in both like Elder Dragon Highlander and, you know, general standard formats for a while. It's an interesting option if you want to go for like some Elder Dragon. It's Commander now. It's been Commander for 20 years. maybe less, I'm not sure. In any case, this is a card that definitely has that like sort of flexibility and ability to destroy just your opponent's stuff, but it does give your opponent a little time to react to it, and thus like sacrifice things that might need sacrificed, or find some way to destroy the Waystone Alignment with relic destruction so their stuff doesn't get blown up. There are a lot of caveats here that may make Waystone Alignment not quite as good in terms of its overall effect, but the ability to just sort of wreck your opponent's stuff pretty quickly is, yeah, pretty cool. I think it's kind of interesting. Overall, I don't think that at the start of your turn kill something is all that powerful in effect, so I'm not looking to see this card be insanely strong, but I do think it's a pretty interesting option that does give you like basically really, really good potential for high-level play where you can do some pretty wild things to some different decks that are maybe not necessarily going to be fully equipped for this. It's good against aggro stuff, it's good against mid-range stuff. If you actually get anything where your opponent is just playing a lot of stuff at the same cost, and you're kind of carefully curating what they're putting down, this card can lead to a ton of card advantage very quickly. For a colorless card, not that bad. Jada the Peacekeeper, 3 cost 4/5 stealth. When Jada blocks or is blocked, play a Justice Sigil from your deck, depleted, and he gets -4 this turn. Okay, there's a lot to break down here. So this is a card that attacks for nothing and blocks for nothing. But it does have 5 health at 3 cost, and if it does actually hit, which is fairly likely, it deals a lot of damage for a 3-cost card. I would say this card is actually grossly overstated, especially for a stealth card. It never trades with anything, which is fairly important, but the fact that it plays a Justice Sigil from your deck means that you are frequently always going to get at least some advantage out of this card. Like, you play this card on 3, it can eat things like Torch and like anything that you might throw at a stealth unit to find out what it is. If you silence it, it becomes a straight 4/5, which is worse, so revealing the card with silence is a very, very big trap here. And then, on top of all of that, this card ramps you into 5-cost and 6-cost cards very quickly. If you manage to block with it more than once, then it's just a constant engine to get Justice Sigils out of your deck and improve the strength of your deck, which is wild. And if you are just attacking with it, getting a Justice Sigil, and then it gets like double blocked, you're not too unhappy with that because you still get an actual like extra power to ramp with, and that is something that you paid 3 for, Secret Pages style. This is a really, really strong card. I think this card basically does just a wild amount of things. In particular in Expedition, I think this is just like an automatic 4 of in a lot of Justice heavy decks. It is incredibly strong. It's a really, really good stealth choice. It doesn't really trade with anything ever, but the fact that it is just so easy to do ridiculous things with, I think really makes it like kind of just an exceptional card, because basically this card's purpose is not usually to be a clock for your opponent, but in any world where your opponent doesn't have units and you're keeping their units down, it is a really significant clock for their opponent. It becomes a threat that they immediately have to deal with. And when it isn't a clock for your opponent, it is constantly ramping you into bigger and better stuff. So mid-range to high-cost Justice decks are just going to be super happy to play this card. This is really, really good. All right, there's a premium transpose, so fancy that. There's also a premium obliterate in the preview event, and I believe that's everything on the main list. We have one last spoiler to go over. That is Iron Ursa. That is a 3-cost 3/2 Overwhelm Reckless Stealth Grenadin Bear. It's got Intrigue 2+2+2, so if you have 5 power, you play this as a 5/4 with Overwhelm and Reckless. And its ultimate ability is when the enemy player plays a spell, you reveal Iron Ursa to negate it. So, modestly inefficient card, at least at 3. At 5, I would say this card is reasonably stat efficient just because Overwhelm on a 5/4 is actually pretty relevant and forces some interesting blocks and stuff to happen. But the fact that this card just stops any spell that your opponent is playing on the turn that it is played makes it a real tricky one to navigate around. You really kind of have to fight this on a unit-based strategy, because if your opponent puts this down and then it counters out whatever your enemy was going to do, that's really, really significant. One notable thing about this is that it makes it so that there are reasons not to hold up stuff like, say, Wisdom of the Elders. So, like, if you're on turn 3, and you leave 3 power open, Iron Ursa is the perfect play for your opponent, because they can play it before Wisdom of the Elders is drawn, and then after that, they just know that at the end of turn, you're going to play the Wisdom of the Elders, or you're going to play a removal spell, or you're going to play something, and they're almost guaranteed that card advantage. So that's something to really keep an eye out for. If you're a player who plays spell-based decks, then what you want to be doing is you actually want to be Wisdoming at the end of your own turn, instead of at the end of another turn if you're up against other blue decks, which is, yeah, a very different change. So something to note, this card actually does some nasty stuff to draw-go decks and makes it so the decks don't have quite as many different tools to play with. It's also a bear and a Grenadin, both together, which is awesome. That's really all we have to say about that. Yeah, so this is all the spoilers so far for Hour of Glass, but we sure are going to be breaking down more of them as we get along. I am still in the process of doing some moving stuff, but I am significantly less busy now, and hopefully will be for about a week or two before we make what potentially might be a very big change. We'll be updating you more on that as time goes on. In the meantime, however, we're real excited for Hour of Glass. We're happy to play it, and that probably should be out sometime late in the month, I would guess after the weekend event, during which we will be able to play with those cards, as there's going to be a preview event. So yeah, should be a lot of fun. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. We'll talk to you about more spoilers very, very soon on our Eternal Spoiler Breakdown. And if you want to see me live, I'm on Twitch TV/LocalPojo. So keep looking for me there until I potentially change my username. Stuff happens. All right, see you in a bit. Cheers.